this month, again, it's like it's so amazing because of this theme of water. Because on the one hand, as we began talking about, it's a blessing. Water is the greatest blessing. It is synonymous in Torah with reward. So Hashem tells us Moshe goes over it in the second paragraph of the Shema in Deuteronomy, that Hashem says that if you'll listen to me and hearken to my word, I will give you the rains in their appointed times. Right. So it's like I say, just speaking in contemporary Israel, like even secular people that are somewhat plugged into the sanctity of the land know there's nothing better than a good, wet, rainy winter. It's so important to us. But at the same time, water has this strange dichotomy, because it is, again, absolutely synonymous with reward and blessing, and yet what do we find? That it's also the instrument of retribution, as it was in the time of the flood. So I see three specific aspects to water. It is basically synonymous with faith, pure faith. It is synonymous with faith, and therefore, when we follow Hashem's word at all personal cost, it is the reward itself. But it's also the element of testing, right? Because there can be a time that Hashem withholds water, and then it becomes the element of actual punishment, as we see in the flood. Why is that? Why is that? Why does it have so many different faces?
Well, I think the main one of the main aspects of the way water is characterized in the flood, because the waters were also the waters of the deep. The waters from heaven came down. The waters from the deep. These are these giant thermal springs.
Everything at once, right? Water. From up and from down. Just a whole thing.
And it has a cleansing effect. If you want to sterilize something, you boil it. And so,
and by the way, it was boiling.
It was boiling water, which was measure for the sins of that generation that were very sins of passion and sexual depravity. So this is a lot of people look like, and this aspect. This boiling water is what leached all of the rich nutrients from the soil, because that's where everything starts, is in the soil. So
I like how you're darting back and forth between those scientific aspects and everything that we're understanding, because it's one picture. So what you just started to say now about the cleansing effect, right? Mm-hmm. I think we can say also that when we look at this whole mystery of water being faith itself, the element of reward, and the element of testing, and the element of retribution. Actually, there is a place where all of this begins, that's staring us in the face. The place where all of this begins that is so remarkable, because water is the only element about which we do not read that it was created. And this is one of the most unbelievable secrets in the Torah. Because when we begin Parshat Breshit, as we did last week, we read in the second verse that the earth was astonishingly empty, and darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered upon the surface of the waters. And hello? Did I miss something here? And then Hashem said that there'd be light. Let's turn the light on all of this. But what about the creation of the water? Yeah. It's not described. Now, one could make a mistake, a fatal mistake, and think that water is like its own thing, its own dominion, its own power, that God is on the level of another god of water or something. That would be a fatal mistake. Rather, the lesson that the Torah is giving us, by not even reporting on the creation of water, it is the emphasis is the very ancient aspect of water. First of all, what it represents. It represents Torah, it represents spirit, it represents in fact, there's this whole idea that they just talk about that the Spirit of God hovering over the water is an allusion to Mashiach, which is the end game, again, the acharit, the end game of the Bereshit, of the beginning. But the idea is that water, because it is so ancient, and because when the scene opens, what's described to us is that there's nothing, it's astonishingly empty, chaos and void, but there's water there. And Hashem is there. So that is basically indicating to us that water is so ancient that it witnessed all of creation. And that is so deep because on one level, it's somehow associated with the secret of mikveh, like the secret of purification. Because when a person wants to purify before Hashem, which is basically like being born again, if you'll pardon me, it really is. The whole experience of the mikveh is assuming this kind of fetal position and coming out like of a womb and being totally refreshed. And this is the Torah's recipe for impurity, other than the impurity of death, which is only facilitated by the ashes of the red heifer. But the concept of water purification in Torah, how does that work? How does that even work? It's a tremendous mystery, it would appear to be. This is the law of Torah, water purification. But on the one level, in a very beautiful spiritual way of looking at it, we could understand. You know what? I'm going into the mikveh, and there's all sorts of kavanot. There's all sorts of special intentions and prayers that a person has when they go into the mikveh to immerse and purify. But one of the simple things that I keep in mind is, I don't know how this works. I don't know how anything works, do I? But yet I also don't know how Hashem created the world from nothing. But yet this is the secret of water. So in other words, water at its most basic level is the representation of pure emunah, of pure faith. And I think that the reason that it is the facilitator of purification is because this is the beginning of everything, and therefore one step follows another, and that's why it also becomes the element of faith, of reward, and of testing, and of retribution, because it really represents the total emunah in Hashem's creation altogether.
Yeah, it's the word for water in Hebrew, Hashemayim. The water's there. That's the word,
the word
for
heaven. Right.
It's that's so amazing.